Go for it.
Do you want me to introduce him?
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Marriage Monday. We are so glad that you're here with us on this wonderful Monday night. And this week, we promised you a very special treat, and we delivered. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Samuel Stephen Byers.
Oh, am I the treat?
Yes,
Samuel
you are
Byers.
a treat for today.
I'm the treat that y'all
He
promised?
is the treat that we promised. He is our Rice Krispie treat. Boom. Okay.
Oh my
So
gosh.
anyway, no, we are so glad to have Sam on the line today. I said on the line. It's still in. And so Sam is Sam, tell me about yourself, because I'm trying to figure out this Zoom call we're recording, and Sam does this in his sleep, literally. So Sam, what do you do up in DFW?
No, I work for Gateway Church, and I'm a live video director. So everything that is happening within the auditorium, like that goes on the screens, it's my responsibility. So yeah, things like this, I'm definitely not a stranger to. And I'm excited to be here. I like watching your guys' Marriage Mondays. I've watched a few of them, and I enjoy them.
A few?
Yeah, just a few.
And you haven't subscribed to whatever Sam. I think we're in the recording now. So. No, I'm just going to give a quick backstory. We asked Sam if he would come on and record with us because a couple of weeks ago, we were in Dallas area. We were having a party with my niece, and so we were celebrating that, and Sam and I were out by the pool and just chillaxing, and we started talking, and the conversation was really good, and I said that this needs to be on Marriage Monday. And so he was like, okay, I got roped into it. But anyway, no, it was really good because the conversation, Sam, and you can hop in anytime, we started talking about expectation. And then we just started writing down these couple of different things. And I said, no, this is really good because Sam has been through a ton. This family has been through a ton. And so, Sam, tell us a little bit about that, some of the background, maybe the marriage, things like that.
Well, pause real fast, because not everybody might not know that he is my brother. So
Yes.
that's how he fits into this equation.
Sam is more my
People
brother.
don't know that I'm your brother.
This is true.
But nevertheless, anyway, go for it.
So I am Ruth's brother. That's true. But no, I really liked the conversation that we were having, and just a little background from me. I was married. I got married in 2016, and we were married for about almost 3 years, but it sadly ended in divorce. And we went through a lot of hardships and a lot of difficulties in our marriage. A huge thing was expectations for us. And God definitely brought me so much closer to him throughout the whole entirety of the journey, and really just pulled me close. And one of the first things for me that he started to speak into was my identity.
Yeah.
And going through difficulties in my marriage, if you guys are going through any difficulties, you might relate to this, but my identity was so wrapped up in what I thought she thought of me, and not so much about who I actually am.
Yeah.
And I was driving, I think I was driving home from work one night, and I was just praying to God. And he started to just say, hey, just so you know, your identity is not who your wife thinks you are.
Wow.
Your identity isn't even who you think you are. Your identity is who I say you are and who I made you to be.
Wow.
And so that was huge for me, because just the first part was okay, yeah, I'm being ridiculous, thinking that my wife's opinion is who I am. But then the second part went even further in, you're not even who you think you are.
Yeah.
That's not your identity. And so our mental image of ourselves and the burdens that we can carry, and oh, I need to be this, or I need to do that, or I need to look this way. That's not even our identity. And you actually don't have a say in who you are.
Yeah.
You just are.
Yeah.
And so
what kind of pressure does that put on you? I mean, as you're saying all this, I'm thinking about the immense amount of pressure that not only are you having to receive from your spouse, and it
Yeah.
could be anybody. I mean, I know that marriage is hard, but it could be from a boss. It could be from friends, like a community group. When you have that pressure pressing on you, I mean, what does that do when you don't have that identity grounded in Christ?
The pressure is horrible. I mean, even before like marriage for me, like pressure in our family, and just like kind of who my dad is. Lots of pressure from other people followed that, and it's just like you feel like you don't live up to the expectations of other people, and it crushes you.
Yeah.
Let alone like you start to have self-image problems because of it. Like you don't feel good enough in multiple ways, and it's just it's not good. But when your identity is grounded in who God says you are, and then you understand like that's unwavering, right?
Yeah.
Like that's something that you can ultimately like make mistakes, but that doesn't mean that you are those mistakes. You're not your mistakes. You're not your problems. You're not like your worst decisions. They don't define you.
Yeah.
And like that was a big thing that I had to learn going through my divorce, was that my divorce didn't define me.
Wow.
And a lot of people, I think, especially in the church world, look at divorce as like the scarlet letter.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, everyone's going to look at me and know that I'm divorced. And like they think that that's just going to be like written across their forehead. And that's the first thing that people think about when they see them. Like that's it's just this weird mindset in like the church world that like you're super judged now because you're divorced, which is so not true.
Yeah.
And it's just ultimately like for me, I did everything I could think of to possibly like make our relationship a healthy relationship. I read books, I went to like seminars, and just countless data, just taking it in, trying to study like how do I heal my marriage. And that ultimately was also part of the problem. Like my mindset of I need to fix this and I need to heal this was not a good mindset for me to be in, and caused me more problems, caused me more stress, rather than just giving it to God and just saying like, Lord, like help. But
that's really good.
Yeah. So expectations are huge.
All right. So, and as we're sitting by the pool, we were talking about kind of that, and then we went to talking about painting a target, and then communication, how that's kind of a big key thing.
Yeah.
So, give me 1 second, Sam. All right, Sam, we are back online. All right, so we let off just a second, just opening the conversation on communication. Yes. And choosing love and communication of needs. Tell us some of the tools that you've learned, some of the keys you've learned about communication. And
so communication is an interesting thing, because in relationships, ultimately, every disconnect that you guys are having could most likely be taken down to just bad communication.
Yeah.
And communication just being the error. Either like not enough communication from her, not enough communication from you, or you feel like you're over communicating, but they're not listening. Like it's all tied into communication. And so just having honest, open conversations with your spouse is such a huge tool that we take for granted a lot of times. And just being able to be like, hey, so just so we're clear, when you say this, I'm receiving it this way. Is that how you're wanting to convey that? Or like, it sounds like a redundant question or a redundant conversation, but it helps so much just to be like, oh no, like that's not at all what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, oh, if Daniel is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get off of work.
You can just go ahead and just go.
I'm sorry.
No.
And so like the conversations can feel a little bit redundant, but the reality is Daniel can be at work, like expecting to come home from work and just like, I just want to relax. I just want to like watch a movie with my kids. And everything's going to be great. And then he comes into the door and Ruth is like, oh, good, you're here. I need you to do this. And I need you to do this. Like this has been waiting. Like there's so much stuff at the house that we need to do. And we need to go grocery shopping, like all this stuff. And it's like, oh, well, Daniel didn't communicate to Ruth, like, hey, I'm coming home tonight and I just want to relax. Like, can we just put everything on pause? And ultimately, if you had that conversation beforehand, Ruth could very much well be like, yeah, like that's perfectly fine. My mind is already on these things, but I can put a pin in it real fast and we could just take care of some of the stuff tomorrow. Or it's like, oh no, well, I need this done tonight. Like this is time sensitive or whatever. Yeah. And then Daniel's like, okay, well, I'm on my way home, so I have the time to prepare myself to like not be resting tonight and actually getting things done.
It actually reduces a lot of the stress there, because when you communicate these things, then it feels like you're putting the ball in their court on how they want to respond. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah.
No.
Anything you want to say?
And also just not reacting to things. Like if it didn't go the way that you thought it was going to go, not to react and to be able to take a step back and to get your emotions under control. Yeah. Especially for me.
Which that kind of ties into like healthy fights, right?
Right.
Yeah. So like emotionally reacting, then you're all of a sudden you're in a fight. And that's a huge thing that I try to do. I try to put myself in a mindset prior to conflict. I don't know if any of y'all know anything about Enneagrams, but I'm an Enneagram 9 and we hate conflict. So I'm constantly thinking, how can I avoid conflict or like not just encounter it at all? And one of the things in relationships that I've tried to take on is a mindset going in like, we're going to have disagreements. We're going to have like a disconnect eventually. Yeah. So I need to be in the mindset of it is never me versus you or you versus me. It is always going to be us versus the problem. Yeah. And with that mindset, you're already positioned to move forward in your relationship versus butting heads and coming to a halt and being like, no, like I need to quote unquote win. Like I need to win this argument. Like she's wrong or like she did something that was wrong. It doesn't matter like who's wrong, who's right. Yeah. If you're fighting about it and it's causing conflict, you both are losing at this point. Like it doesn't matter like the quote unquote yes. And so understanding like, okay, it's going to be us versus the problem. It's never now about who's right, who's wrong. It's like, okay, why is this coming up right now? Yeah. Like what's coming into our life right now, trying to bring a disconnect, trying to bring separation instead of unity. Yeah. And you take that on as a team now because you have a teammate. And it's like, cool, let's figure this out. Yeah. So I'm frustrated because of this situation. Or I came in expecting this, and now I'm kind of let down. And it's not on you because I didn't voice that. Or maybe you did, and it is on them. But it's you have those conversations. And the I don't know if any of you guys know who Brene Brown is. She is an amazing person who has written books on vulnerability and conflict and insecurity and just like relationships. And one of the things that she taught or speaks about that I just kind of took onto my own life is this phrase, the story I'm telling myself. Yeah. And in fights, because you can get into situations where it's just like they don't understand where you are in your mind. And so rather than saying triggering words like you always or like you never do this, or like you told me I was not attractive. You told me I wasn't like, no, that's not at all what was said. The best way to approach that is to say, so the story I'm telling myself is that when I say this and ask you to do something and then it doesn't get done, you're communicating to me I'm not valuable. Yeah. And now it kind of de-stresses the situation because you're not saying, hey, you told me I'm not valuable. You're saying, this is the story that I'm hearing in my head.
Yeah.
So I understand going into this doesn't mean that it's a reality. It's just what's screaming in my head right now.
Yeah. We talked about that tool because Danny Silk, we do a lot of Danny Silk stuff as well. And he'll say that I feel blank when you blank. I need to feel blank. And he's taking in this one, and it's anybody that wants to use this tool or Brene Brown, you can say the story I'm telling myself. What you're wanting to do in both of these situations is take the blame off of Ruth and then say, okay, I'm not the judge and jury. I'm not going to decide, what's actually going on here. This is what I'm experiencing, and this is the way that I feel. Tell me, what you're going to do about it. Like I'm putting the ball in their court kind of thing. And it really does de-escalate everything.
Yeah.
And I feel like your actions do speak. And like what you said, like when you don't have to talk, but when they do things or they don't do things that you've talked about, then it does. There are lies that are going on in the spouse's mind that are like, oh, well, this has happened. And that, because we've had fights like that where I've said, well, you called me this or called me that. And he's like, I never said that. It's because
I never did.
But because that's what was going on in my head. That's why I would rationalize why he did what he did was because of he thinks this then.
Yes.
And so, but those things never came out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And it just it's a huge helping tool. And again, just like if you have to be vulnerable enough to let your spouse into your world, into your mind, because if you're walking around with frustrations and they ask you, hey, is everything okay? And you're like, no, everything's fine. Like, we're good. But you're not good. Like, they feel the tension.
Yeah.
And they feel like that things aren't good.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge issue, because then your other spouse could be thinking, well, do they not confide in me? Do they not trust me enough to tell me like that things are not okay? And it's perfectly fine to not be okay. Because then you take it on as a team and you're like, okay, well, let's figure out why. Like, why are you feeling discomfort? Why are you feeling like you can't trust me with this? Why are you feeling this? And if you don't let them into your world, then there's so much more problems, because we're not mind readers, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can't just sit there and think, and you're over there in the corner and you're just like, man, I wish that they would just do this, but you've never communicated that.
Yeah.
They can't just magically be like, oh, well, maybe they want me to do this. And like the chances of them guessing at what you want them to do is not going to happen.
Yeah. That's good.
So just sitting down and just being like, hey, I would really appreciate it if blah, 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 blah. It's a conversation.
Yeah.
And relationships are so much just a conversation.
Yeah.
Like just getting to know each other, just getting to build something together as a team. And even in my relationship now, like with my girlfriend that I have, we've over communicated, and I've had to communicate to her that, hey, I want you to tell me when things aren't okay.
Yeah.
Like exclusively, that's when I want you to communicate to me.
Yeah.
And she kind of was taken back by that. And she was like, well, normally I just like try to figure things out and figure out why I feel that way. And I'm like, that can help us so much more, just being like, hey, I'm feeling distant today.
Yeah.
And because that's the way that I've seen the enemy work in relationships, is all of a sudden you feel like you can't talk to that other person.
Yeah.
And when you can just go to them, like they're the first person you go to, and you're just like, I'm starting to feel like a wall between us, and just be honest about it. A lot of times we don't know why.
Yeah.
We don't understand it. It's just like, well, that could fully be an attack of the enemy.
Yeah.
Or you can just be like, hey, I'm starting to feel like distance between us. And they could come back with, well, that could be on me because I've been stressed out with finances. I've been stressed out with this, and I haven't really like been present.
Yeah.
And maybe they know that, and it's like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's really much like a detective, like mystery type thing. Relationships are, which I love them because it is that way. And I love like finding like, oh, well, why is there this disconnect? Why is there this mystery? and then plugging in the tools and just the knowledge.
Yeah.
And communication is such a helping tool. I don't think you can over communicate.
That's true. All right. So, and this is, I mean, these are all the things we discussed by the pool, except for this one here. So, closing comments. So we're kind of wrapping up this episode here. Just within a couple of minutes, tell me some of the directions you would give for couples and some of the things maybe you regret not knowing at the time, but you're like, hey, if you're newlyweds or even, 50 years married, this is something that I want to share with them. So what were those? I know that's kind of putting you on the spot, but
no, you're good.
A couple of things that would be.
First thing that comes to my mind, you're never done dating.
Wow.
So just continue to date your spouse. Like, I don't care if you've been married like 75 years. I don't care if you've been married like 6 months. Like, continue to date. That's such an important thing. It's literally like setting like specific time apart each week or month, however you want to do it. Hopefully it's a weekly thing.
Every year, you're going to go on a date.
An amazing day.
Every 10 years, it's going to be knockers.
It's going to be fantastic. Yeah, we do it. And so, just continue to date your spouse, continue to date, and just show them the same attention, the same respect, the same like interest that you did when you were first pursuing them. I think that it's very important to talk and have just like fun conversations. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think you ever truly fully get to know someone and know everything about them. You can still find things that you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that you liked this, or I didn't know that you thought this way. That's very interesting. And it can be fun. The other thing I would say is, for me, I love to surprise like people in relationships. I love to like, yes.
I hear her. I don't know if that is
understanding how your spouse likes to be surprised is a huge help there, because some people don't like surprises. It stresses them out. Some people, the worst thing you can do is tell them like, hey, I got you something, but it's coming in the next few days. Just don't tell them. And when it shows up, give it to them. Like, you just have to have those conversations to understand like, oh, this is how I can help you. Like how do you receive gifts? How do you, just, again, it kind of goes back to conversation here, but it's a huge part of it. And then you are in the relationship with your spouse or your partner. No one else is.
Yeah.
So you can take people's opinions and kind of like shelf them. Don't let other people's opinions define your relationship. And get to know your partner, get to know your spouse, and just understand like the healthier y'all are together, it's gonna bloom like nothing else. Mm. And so other people can nitpick from the fence of the garden, right? But if you're not actually the one like sowing the seeds, like preparing the land, like you're the one doing all the work, they can't define that garden.
Yeah.
And so same thing with your relationships. Like, listen to other people, especially like if y'all are if you need help, please reach out. Counseling, please don't have a bad thought in your head towards counseling.
Yeah. Going
and seeing a therapist, like there's so much to mental health and just relationship health. Like, it's not, I think the healthiest people are seeing counselors. They are seeing therapists.
That's good.
It doesn't mean you're unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so, take that stigma out of it, because our therapist helped us so much in our marriage. And so ultimately it didn't save my marriage, but I don't regret going and seeing a therapist at all.
Yeah. That's good. Is there anything else you want to add?
No.
All right. Well, Sam, I love you. I don't know,
guys.
People we interview, so but I really do love you. Probably more than Ruth. You're more my brother, and that's okay. We'll talk about that later. So anyway, each week we always do a growth moment. So Sam, I'm going to give you the honors. We didn't talk about this at all, but what would you have our audience grow in this week? It could be more communication. It could be take your spouse on a date. Yeah. What would you encourage them to do this week? One thing.
Find some time to sit down and just be completely transparent with them. And just have a vulnerable conversation with them. And maybe it's a conversation you've been avoiding, or something that's really bothered you, but you've kind of just decided to take the pain of it. Just go back, and maybe you're revisiting something that you guys resolved, but you still feel pain from.
Yeah.
Go back and just sit down and have a transparent, vulnerable time together. And just, yeah.
That's a good growth moment. All right. Well, Sam, wave at everybody in Facebook, YouTube land. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, Samuel Stephen Byers. We love you, Sam.
We'll see you later.
Love you guys.
See y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.